And we are back. It is our 5th super fight for the night. Grace electing to pull guard. And Hafsah getting straight to work, passing Grace's guard. Great work by Hafsah. Really slick duck under Grace's leg as Grace tried to high leg and recover her guard. And Hafsah having a lot of success with that pass. She's using a thumb down grip on the leg of Grace Ash while she's playing seated guard. Now Hafsah finds herself on a front headlock and pinning Grace Ash while riding the legs. Hafsah really biting down now on a brutal crossface. You can see Hafsah's right arm deep in the armpit of Grace Ash, her face totally turned towards the crowd. It's an absolutely brutal crossface. Looks to me like Hafsah is now trying to flatten out Grace a little bit so she can free her leg from 3/4 mount. She is close to mounting, but we can see Hafsah's foot was still trapped inside the legs of Grace Ash. And I believe now Grace has been reset in the bottom of our penalty reset position for lack of action. So very unfortunate for Grace Ash here. I'm sure Hafsah super happy to now be behind the elbows of Grace Ash, but Grace Ash and using it to her advantage, almost getting a leg entry there on Hafsah. This is starting to appear to be a pretty classic matchup of very dominant, heavy guard passing versus someone who is looking for leg locks. And although Hafsah has been very dominant so far, against a good leg locker, it only takes one mistake and it can all be over, as we've seen in a few matches tonight. And Hafsah going back to that same pass that worked for her so well at the start of this round works for her again now in a very deep pin, finding her way past the legs again. And I would say for Grace Ash, this is going to be a very tough match if she's not able to adjust her style. Hafsah, very dominant from side control. Once again, you can see she really wedges in that crossface and pulls her elbow back to her hip and just puts massive pressure on the face of Grace Ash. Grace wrestling up on a single leg now, but unfortunately, elbows extended, arms extended, elbows away from the ribs. This is one of the most fatiguing positions in all of the sport. It's not a position you want to be for long. If you are going to wrestle up there, you need to be very explosive with it and get it done. Unfortunately for Grace, she wasn't able to wrestle up through the position. Finds herself returned to her back. by Hafsah Daniels.
The judges give that round to the blue corner.
I'm interested to see what approach Grace takes. I suspect wisely, Grace looks like she wants to wrestle now. I would agree that's a great approach for her. She decides to sit back to a seated guard. Unfortunately, she seems to be struggling to deal with Hafsah's passing from the seated guard position. And really nice passing from Hafsah Daniels. There's not too much else to say about this match. It seems to just be the story of Hafsah absolutely smashing the guard of Grace Ash. And like I mentioned before, Grace, we can't count her out. With someone with a good leg attacks, the match could be over at any second. But it looks to me like Hafsah's just a little bit too aware for Grace's current skill set and arsenal of attacks. Seems to me that Hafsah is maybe a half step ahead, or not even a step ahead, but able to recognize Grace's attacks pretty early. She's always shutting them down. And I suspect this could be the story of this match. Grace struggling to deal with the passing of Hafsah. I'm excited to see if she decides to switch up her strategy in the last round. She's getting closer on a leg now, but again, Hafsah very aware of what's going on. Deals with the leg, sneaking back in and pins. Very tough match for Grace Ash here. If I was Grace's coach, I would probably advise her to wrestle in the last round. I thought it looked like it was working for her at the start of this round, although we only got to see a very quick glimpse. She was definitely holding her own and doing a great job being aggressive in the stand-up wrestle. Would like to see Grace Ash maybe wrestle a bit more in the last round, but we will see. And props to the tenacity of Grace Ash. She's never giving up. She's always framing and recovering her guard. But unfortunately for her, the onus is on her to change up her style in the game when the game you're playing is just not working for you. And Hafsah wisely playing a fairly conservative game in terms of submissions. She's not really looking for any submissions, but to be fair to Hafsah, she has almost no reason to because she is so dominant in top position. Grace finding herself once again at the bottom of our penalty position, and she's once again looked to roll through and attack a leg. It seems like Hafsah remembers what happened last time and is a little bit more wary of that sneaky attack now.
The judges score this round to the blue corner.
Grace looking to wrestle a little bit more in this round, which I think is a good idea for her. Unfortunately, just as I say that, she returns to a seated guard, which is really just not working for her. But to be fair, when you have a game plan that you like and that works for you, it can be very hard to just completely ditch that game plan at the drop of a dime. I feel a little bit bad for Grace Ash getting reset in that penalty position twice now. It can be so hard to escape when you have someone on top of you who doesn't really intend on submitting you. Or as I say that, Hafsah proves me wrong and starts looking for a finish on the arm of Grace Ash. Hafsah making me eat a bit of humble pie there. She does end up going for the submission. And to be fair on Hafsah, there's really no reason for her to risk a submission because she has been so dominant up until this point in the match, but that does make it extremely hard for Grace Ash to have any chance of getting out. If I'm Grace in this situation, I would almost consider giving up an arm in the hopes that Hafsah will try and rip it off and maybe I can hit some form of turning escape, because it appears there is no other way out for Grace Ash at this point. Hafsah starting to set up an arm triangle. It looks like Hafsah is really taking her time setting this one up. trying to get it as deep as possible. And look for Hafsah to possibly start dismounting and laying next to Grace Ash to get an even tighter finish. There we go. Hafsah moving to a shin mount. Likely going to look to move off the body, but Grace doing a good job defending. Hafsah burying her ear down next to Grace's ear. Hafsah looking to set up a modified arm triangle that her coach, who is coaching her right now, Euros, hit a very nice one of this submission recently in competition. Hafsah looking to replicate the move in her match now, which does work best when your opponent on bottom turns away from you, which Grace is doing. And we can see Euros clearly calling for Hafsah to look for that technique as Grace turns away. Grace now flat on her back with Hafsah looking to set up the regular arm triangle. And good work by Grace to constantly play between turning out and turning in to defend this arm triangle and also to try and find a way out. Hafsah just taking absolutely zero risk with her submission attempts, and you can't blame her for it. Giving Grace a very difficult time to find any space or any slither of hope of escaping the position. "20 seconds to go." Great effort and tenacity by Grace, but I'd say this is clearly Hafsah's match. It's a shame she didn't try and deviate from the game plan a little bit when it was clear that it was no longer working. Playing seated guard against Hafsah Daniels is not a good idea, as we just learned.
All judges score this 30-25 to your winner out of the blue corner, Hafsah Daniels.